The second part of this demonstration involves smaller shapes, and just keep proceeding along, mixing the colors that I see and seeing if I can indicate surface and side a little bit more. I've speeded this video up quite a bit because it really takes a lot of thought, and I pause a lot when I'm painting, and I think that's, as the saying goes, a little bit like watching paint dry. So speed it up, I can usually see what's happening. I'm just working from larger shapes to smaller shapes, definitely putting in some lights now, and I think I'll review the colors that I have on my palette again, because I think I missed a couple when I talked about it the first time. I start with titanium white and then go to King's Blue Light, which could be mixed by a cobalt and a tiny little bit of ultramarine plus a lot of white. So it's just a very light baby blue. And the third color is Naples Yellow, then Cad Yellow Light, then Cad Red Light. On a bigger palette I'd have an orange in there, but this space restricts that. And then I think it's raw sienna, and then a permanent magenta or a quinacridone rose. I'm not sure which is, I use both. This could be either one of those. And then we've got a violet gray, a cerulean blue, an ultramarine blue, a phthalo green, burnt sienna, and then ivory black. As I proceed, it's just literally developing everything that I see, especially looking at shapes, shadow shapes, and leaving branches till last. I'm looking for areas that are a little bit darker and seeing if I can see the shape of those areas. Anything that doesn't have light popping through. Anything that is a solid area, if I squint and don't see any light in it, then I'm going to try to nail it down and see it as an entire shape independent of anything else. You'll notice I'm holding the brush in a way that I didn't used to do this. I had some surgery, so I can't hold the brush the way I'd like to, a little bit further back. So I'm gripping it pretty solidly, and I can still move it around. But excuse me, I would really like to be able to hold it in a little bit lighter and a little bit further back on the handle. But right now this is the only way I can do it, and it seems to work okay. But I would recommend that you hold it a little bit more like you'd hold a utensil, and hold it further back so you have a lot more freedom. Now I moved it so that you can see the whole painting a little bit more. I've still got a different angle. It's still slanted quite a bit, so I know that I'm looking at an angle that's not quite as the same as what we're seeing here on the video. But even so, the shape of the top part of the building is higher on my painting than it should be. And I don't think I ever correct it completely, although I get it narrowed down a little bit later. Now this is interesting. I'm going to be looking at the light areas, and again the light areas that are connected across, seeing surface areas against shadow areas, trying not to look at little spots or broken pieces. I look for where things are connected as much as possible. Connections are key here. Not what is unique, but what is connected and consistent. Instead of looking for exceptions, I'm looking for the most I can see that one thing connects into another, shadows into shadows, light into light. That way, I'm forcing my brain to see how things are instead of what I think I see, which is often little tiny pieces of leaves or little tiny pieces of flowers, spot, spot, dot, dot. And that's really not going to make a nice painting in the end. And it becomes a symbol or a system or a repetitive, habitual. We put a color down and we start repeating it, and it gets to be kind of regular and a little bit predictable, and it's not how nature really is. So I squint my eyes and see, where is the surface area? How does that connect across? And where is the shadow area? And after all of that is developed, then I start working on where the limbs or the branches are in between what I've already put down as the form or the habit of the tree. You can see me finding a way to repeat whatever color I have on my brush around the whole canvas. Every time I make a branch shape, I'm looking at what the shape is next to it, on the other side of it, what the negative shape is, and little pieces at a time. I would never ever make a long streaky line for the trunk of a tree, because that ends up looking more like a telephone pole and it becomes reduced and simplified. Every shape of every branch is made by looking at what is on the outside, the air around it, the shape around it. Because trees undulate just like little saplings when they're searching for the sun. They wander and move sinuously into the sunshine, and a big tree is just a big sapling. It's thick and it's simplified some of those turns and twists, but they're still there. They're just not quite as extreme. So if you think of a big tree as a big sapling and look at the outside air, you'll see how they're never, very, very rarely straight like a telephone pole. And if you find one that is, you kind of should probably adjust that a little bit, because we really don't want to see telephone poles instead of trees. We want to see interest and variation. In this case, I missed the shape. When I review this and do the voiceover, I can see, whoops, the shape in between these two branches should have been much wider. It should have been a bigger triangle. It's not going to kill the painting. It's certainly not going to make or break this. But every time I look at a demonstration that I've done, I see, whoops, I didn't get that one right. And as an observer, it's really fun to see how many things you can catch that while painting, it's not so obvious, which explains a lot. It's like an objective viewer can see so much more than when you're doing it yourself and you're right in the middle of it. I guess that explains why I can critique other people's work and see exactly what needs to be changed or what might be a little bit helpful when I'm looking at my own work. It's not so easy. We always have an easier time checking out other people's work than our own. Now, looking for shapes in between branches. It's really interesting that I can see that the whole area of this part of the white side of the building is a little bit darker on the right side than it is on the left side. Bringing up some of that same color around the painting, just making sure that one color doesn't just happen in one place. Looking for where it repeats itself. Now we're bringing the sky a lot lighter and a lot cleaner towards the horizon. I'm going to just go ahead and let it happen for a while until I see something that I can help with the dialogue. But right now, it's just proceeding. I remember thinking that this white bush might, next to the clothesline, might go a little bit closer to the building rather than having a halo around it, around the building. Seems like there's an equally spaced blue shape all the way around the roof line of the building, so I know that I'm going to be considering that, taking that white flowering shrub a little bit closer to the roof line. Surface of the wall top of the wall much lighter than the whole side of this rock wall should be darker than the whole surface that's catching the light. No exceptions. Nothing on the side should be as light as anything on the top. If you keep that in mind, it'll help when you're making rock walls or any kind of an object in the sunlight. Figure out where the surface is and figure out where the side is, and don't let them be confused. Don't let them interact back and forth. One should be lighter, one should be darker, period. You can see so much of what I do is cutting in from the outside in, bringing whatever is dark up to and into the silhouette of what is light, refining the silhouette and making it more lacy and more beautiful rather than having the original rounded shape exist. I'm watching myself paint as if from another person's point of view. It's really interesting to do it this way. And as all I can say is, I enjoy this so much. This is a wonderful thing to be able to develop something that takes so much practice and so much dedication, so much time, and getting to a point where you can usually get something acceptable, certainly not frameable, but something acceptable in a short period of time. And the process is just a joy because every part of it is so challenging, and every tiny little success makes me happy. And I have certainly decided that I'm not really ever too disappointed if it doesn't come out, because there's a couple things I know. First of all, there's what they call the artist's curse, or it's a bias that just like you'll never like your own picture, it's virtually impossible for you to be objective about your own painting. It's always going to seem like your paintings are not ever quite what you wanted, or quite what you expect, or quite what you had in mind, and you'll certainly be a lot harder on your own paintings than you will be on others. It's just the nature of things. So I know that, and I also know that there's really no bad outcome, that if things go wrong, I'll probably learn more than if things go right. So with that in mind, it's just a good experience. Let's see what we can learn. Let's see how much more I can find out about the world and about nature and about how shapes work and relate to each other, and how much of my passion and enthusiasm and love of color can come into this so that I can share that with somebody who might enjoy viewing this painting later. And of course, the professional is always involved with the selling of paintings. And I'll tell you what, people can like my paintings all day, but when they actually decide that they want to put them into their home and make them part of their environment and their life, that is a huge, huge compliment. It's like it's the end of a circular, it's like it's the end of a circle that starts with me thinking that I'd like to paint something and enjoying the process, and hopefully coming up with something that's worth putting in a frame, and then having somebody respond to it, and not just in, boy, I really like that, but giving me a good part of their week's wages. Not really, because my paintings aren't that expensive, but you see what I mean? It's like they're actually giving me something so that they can have this in their environment. That is the biggest compliment somebody can give me. And so that's part of what the whole thing is about. Not just sharing, but actually letting somebody have what I have offered and accepting that into their home. I have been selling paintings for a long, long time. And I guess if I had to say what I thought at the beginning of my career, I thought that it would have to do with how much money people had. That I would sell paintings to people with much more, income than other people. But it turns out it hasn't been really quite like that. I certainly know the economy has something to do with it. If people are worried about their future, they're not going to buy paintings right then. But overall, the people that buy paintings are the people that had paintings in their environment when they were kids. If they had paintings at home, it's part of what they consider as a priority. Even if they didn't have paintings, if they saw museums and went to galleries and museums, and they had an awareness of art as being an important thing, then they're always going to think that way, because everybody has something they spend money on. Sometimes it's furniture, sometimes it's horses. I remember when I had horses, I would spend buckets of money on bridles and saddles and board and all feed it. My goodness, everything, every hobby that you have, every interest is going to be involving a lot of money that you decided that that's kind of important to you. Well, the people that buy my paintings are the people that have decided that having a beautiful painting in their home is an important thing. And even if they make payments for a year, very small payments, I must say, it still ends up with a painting going to a home where it will be appreciated. That's a big compliment, and it's also fascinating to me because in reality, my paintings usually don't cost as much as like a brand new sofa out of a furniture store. So it's obviously a decision that, like, well, something that's going to last a lifetime and be handed down to your children and be part of a legacy that you have about what you thought as beautiful and important. That's really more important than a sofa, but a lot of times it costs quite a bit less. You can see that I go around the whole painting. I'm not a painter that likes to go from the top to the bottom, although I've seen some that do. I don't know how that would work. I really can't understand how you could finish one section and not keep going with the other. My high school art teacher used to pull our paintings away at any particular time, especially probably when we started doing just that, finishing something way more than something else. And then it would look off balance and it would look awkward. So I was taught, and I have maintained the idea that the whole painting should proceed along at the same rate. It's like I should be able to pull this at any time and have it look okay and be at the same level all the way around the painting. If you start finishing one thing, you get into too small a shape, the detail, and you start focusing on something and getting well into it, and it still might be possible that that's going to be a waste because you might have to change it or adjust it. And if you've done all of the finish work, you're not going to be willing to see a mistake and change it. You're going to be too precious about that. I've changed the photo here because I saw another photo where the pinks were a little bit more developed, and so I'm using this second reference right now, and just going by some of the extra flowers and extra spring color. In fact, the magnolia in front of this house is in full bloom right now, and I'm going to go back and take another photo, so because it might actually end up being just a little bit more interesting if I have a little bit more developed on the tree. I won't know it though until I see the photos. This is in one of those busy roads, very small country road, but nonetheless it's so narrow and so well traveled that it's not easy to sit next to the road and paint this scene. So I'm using photo reference for sure. Now you see me going inside the shape where the branch will be, and then I'll put in the branch later where the light paint is not. Do the shape up to where the edge, where the branch will be, and leave everything else dry. What I'm doing now is, to a great extent, it's like lightening, putting some gray and some lighter cool on top of the branches. I see so many times students will put branches as being quite black or a dark, dark brown. And again, if we squint our eyes, the left branch on this major tree is darker than the right vertical branch. But at no time are any of the branches, they're not ever just black. And as they are a dark value, a smaller dark value, placed usually in front of a lot of light sky, that light sky influences how dark the dark can be.